Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading property experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, and Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investment Professionals of Australia, and the 2014 and 2015 Property Investment Advisor of the Year.
Alright folks, you're on the Property Couch, where each week Ben and I give you the insider's guide to property investing. Welcome to the couch, mate.
Thank you for having me once again.
Mate, you're always welcome. You're always welcome. Hey, big week for us.
Yeah, we're up against head-to-head.
Telling our listeners, Ben invited me to the inner sanctum of the Collingwood Football Club this week, and I turned down the kind offer.
Yeah, well, didn't want to come into the war trenches. Didn't want to raise the
I got a better
flag.
offer. I got a better offer. My seats are in the rain, in the bitter cold, with the light shining on me.
You know it's going to be 7 degrees on Friday night.
It's going to be fresh. I think it's going to be rubbish.
I reckon most of your players will want to wear, long sleeve because they're a bit soft, a bit cold. They're not used to that weather over in the west versus our cold winter weather straight off the Arctic down
Keep
here.
heckling. I gotta love a good heckle, mate. So this could be very.
So the grudge match is Friday night. We'll see who comes home with the chocolates.
And for all those listeners who hate us bantering about sport, it's Fremantle versus Collingwood at the MCG. Ben and I will both be there.
We will.
If you're there and you see us, give us a shout out. We'll take a photo. We'll get it up on Instagram, won't we, Ibis? And Damien in the office here wants me to bang on about the Cronulla Sharks. Apparently they're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Every time he tries to convince me that it's a good game and I can't work out it's British Bulldogs with a ball.
State of Origin last night. Go the Maroons.
Oh, Queensland.
Hey, there we go. We are just...
Mate, you are rubbing the salt in the wind.
The reason why I go Maroons is because when I left Victoria to work up in the Whitsundays at Hamilton Island for many years early in my career, I thought, well, that's the first state that I lived outside of Melbourne, Victoria. So I'm a Maroon.
Mate,
I love a winner.
I'm a Maroon. Yeah, we love it. And they've won a lot, haven't they, New South Wales supporters? They've won a lot. Yeah. So I lived on the Gold Coast, I lived in Brisbane, so I'm a Maroon of sorts.
Exactly. We really don't know what we're talking about. Did you watch the game?
Not at all. Not at all. But I was happy to hear that they had a win. Hey, Q&A. I love Q&As. I always tell you this. It's the people who listen to us sending in these questions. I think they're really good. So I picked this one up this morning, and from the first sentence I knew we were going to read it. Didn't matter what the question was going to be. It's a message from Steve Happy Gilmore.
Oh, Mr. Gilmore.
Yeah, that's pretty good. As a guy in his mid-40s and having a great passion for property for many years, in brackets, here we go, 10 of which in Perth, go the Dockers. It was always going to be read out, wasn't it? I've had my share of wealth gurus, read all the books and walked on fire with Tony Robbins. Unfortunately, after years do you know that from the moment you walk into his Unleash the Power Within seminar, he's NLPing you from the moment you start that you're going to walk across the fire.
Absolutely.
And you do, mate, that's clever.
He's the world's best practice at all of that stuff.
Very, very good. Unfortunately, after years of hard work and effort, I haven't had the results I'd like due to impatience, being too active and enthusiastic, selling properties, running out of cash many times, and doing it all DIY, unable to find an ethical, skilled advisor. Your podcast has been a breath of fresh air. What I've always searched for. My wife and I have signed up to chat to you guys. We're about to buy a second property through a competitor, but your podcast has made me think we need to know our overall strategy first. What a critical statement there. We need to know our overall strategy first. Anyhow, growth and yield are like a seesaw. As one goes up, the other goes down. Where I wonder is that sweet spot where both balance nicely and their feet dangle without touching the ground. For example, the best growth may be on Sydney Harbour with a view, but you may be negative $1,000 a week. So you could go one suburb back, negative 800 a week. So you could go one more back, 600 a week. At some point, you must hit a spot where you say, that's the best capital growth I can afford. How do you decide that sweet spot? Is it different for all investors? Even if James Packer said to you, get me the best growth you can, income is not a problem. Would there still be a point where you think, geez, even if we buy him a house on the harbour, the growth still won't cover that massive shortfall over time? Great show, keep it up. You're both a shining light in a dodgy, unregulated, shark-filled industry. That's kind.
Shark bath.
After all my experience with people who talk very confidently but don't know what they're doing, in brackets, the enthusiastic amateur you effectively call them, I came up with my own saying, confidence does not equal competence.
Ooh.
But here's the clincher. Unfortunately, all you need is a little doubt in your own abilities and you default to a more confident person.
You do.
Who you may well know more than. All the best. Keep up the good work. Steve Happy Gilmore.
I love
Sweet spot for
that.
capital growth and yield.
Now, he sent that through back in April because obviously we get a lot of inquiry and a lot of Q&A, which is great. And great question. So many parts to it. First part I want to unpack is that lots of false starts. So, the reason why you plan to become what you plan to become is that you don't want to be the ship or the sailing vessel that's on the Sydney to Hobart yacht race and tacking every 5 minutes. You tack for tactical reasons, but you are the fastest boat when you are sailing, not when you're turning corners. So, I say this a lot in my consults when I'm talking to people. It's like, we need to define what you're trying to achieve and work back from that. Because if you can plan that out, hopefully there's not too many tacks. You've got a clear vision in terms of the road. Now, in life, things are going to change. There's going to be some things inside our control, outside of our control. So from that point of view, but the more tacking you do, or the change of strategy, I'm in property 1 minute, then I'm going to jump on shares because a mate at the barbecue says I've made all this money in the share market. That's a classic indicator of people who, and he talks about impatience as well. A lot of us have this, make it sound easy for me and make it sound quick. So that's what they prey on. That's what these people in the shark bath prey on. They get up there, they sound uber confident in terms of what they're doing, and then they go into this sort of, this is how it's done, rah, rah, follow me, but no substance, lack that substance. But I really love his statement.
Because you've had a period of really exceptional growth in property, and you've also had a period of renovation shows dominating the landscape.
Yeah.
So people are seeing instant, quick results. So
Correct.
It's going to test people's resolve in the next cycle, because they're not necessarily going to get those quick wins that you've seen in the past, and it's going to question whether they're on the right path. And exactly what you just said, are they going to tack and miss their strategy just for tacking's sake? So I think it's a really good analogy.
It's a brilliant. So that's a really good point. So let's get into the second story around growth versus yield, because this is the really fundamental science of property investing. And I shouldn't call it a science, because technically, every property is unique. It's probably an art form is a better way to describe it. So what we're trying to explain to people is the reason why that harbour view property is worth its weight in gold is its scarcity. Okay, so it is a rare item that is hard to replicate. So there is no doubt the reason why its growth is increasing is because it has a lot of interest and a lot of demand from people who can afford it. Nice and simple, okay? And because there's a scarcity of it, it's going to continue to keep growing. As Steve points out, the further you go back, the less scarce or the less owner-occupier appeal we talk about it has, the less bragging right, the less status it has. And so even 2 or 3 streets back, looking down away from the bridge is going to be a significantly less valued property than the land and the property pointing at the bridge, as an example. Is there this nirvana, which is really what the question's asking, is there this nirvana where you can get growth and yield? The reality is that if you want consistent growth and reasonably balanced yield in terms of boring growth, boring yield, you would probably pay in the middle ring of a city. You would pay in that middle bandwidth that would be not convenient to get quickly to the city, but not too far out. You'd play in that bandwidth, and that would be an affordability story. So the only thing that's going to be driving growth of those assets is people being priced out of the properties closer in, where there is scarcity around convenience, owner-occupier appeal. So you're sort of looking at that bandwidth that is mid-ring. The further you go out, the more yield you tend to attract, because the less owner-occupier desire, and if you actually have a look at the people's ability to afford it, that's when you see that. So I say this around this story is that when you're chasing yield, you're usually chasing yield because of your household cash flows. Okay, that's the only reason why I would go into regional areas. And timing becomes more important when you're chasing yield. If you get into a marketplace that's got good economic drivers and scarcity and low vacancy rates and just before the market starts to turn, you're going to see some capital growth in that market, because one, it passes the affordability test and it's going to sort of drive. But the main game, and what you were talking about before, why would I want to go growth over yield? The simple fact of the matter is, and I'll just use a perfect example for me, in terms of, the Flemington property I bought, $395,000 in 2005. That property is now worth $830,000, and we're getting over $500 a week rent. Now that yield is still not great, and that's a sign of the Melbourne market, but the growth has been exceptional, right? And so the reality is that the higher the growth goes, the more income I'm still going to be able to charge. The property in Sydney, 1.2 million or 1.3 million, I think I can't remember now. And the same sort of story, we're getting $750 a week for that asset. So the reality is I'm getting all this extra cash because I've got this amazing asset. And I'm always going to have strong rental interest in it because it's usually well located. So we will always chase growth assets over yield assets so long as you can afford it. And that all comes down to your cash flows. Okay, but if we don't have that, it's still absolutely wise to be looking to chase some investment. Don't sit on the sidelines and think, well, I can't do anything, so I'm just going to have to wait until we, start our family, and then our family are in school, and then we're both back on double household incomes. You can't wait that long. It's 5 or 6 years. You could have bought something that's going to get you through that period, and then grab your growth assets later on. So it's all about timing.
Yeah, there's a slide we often do in the talks that we do around the country where you early on you think you're going to get more income from an income asset, but over time, because of what you just described, the drag up of the rent that comes from the capital growth, there comes a tipping point where you're getting the growth on that asset, but you're actually getting more yield as well. So it's almost an illusion that you get more from the positive cash flow property, but you do early days. So if you want to have some surplus, you're thumbing to try and find the page.
Well, I think there might have been something in the book about it where it shows that if you have an 8% yielding asset and 4% growth and then reverse that, then you see how quickly over time which one's the better return. But again, I still, for our clients, we're still saying to them that doing something rather than nothing is still better.
Steve, we have 3 rough categories that we talk about, and Ben does this when he's building a plan for a client. A growth asset, a balanced asset, and an income asset. We call them cash cows. And depending on the individual person's circumstances will depend on which one of those strategies we use. So by default, we want to chase growth, as Ben said, because that's where you get the hugest amplification of your wealth base through the compounding growth. But in some cases, someone may not be in a position where they can get that growth asset first. You talked about one end of the scale with James Packer. Arguably, you would tell him to chase the harbour front because the amount of growth that they get well exceeds the amount of shortfall that they have, and therefore they can afford to do that. So growth is the number one by default play that we have. And then if we're building a tailored solution for everyone across the portfolio, you can't just go growth because they're going to need to. In our conservative strategy, we want to retire some debt so that they can not have to have any major concerns when they go through that pension phase of their life. They're getting a passive income that they can use and the portfolio is being serviced itself. So balanced assets, growth assets and income assets, and we shuffle them around based on the individual's circumstances.
Yeah, well, here's a good example, and this is at the extreme end. Okay, so there's a property in Sydney that was sold 3 years ago for $52 million called Altona. All right, so sold to Chinese owners. They're trying to put it back on the market. But there was a vacant block of land next door that they got for that $52 million. So we talk about scarcity. So we're playing at that top end, right? They reportedly sold that block off for $18 million. And now they're trying to sell the house for $50 million 3 years later. So if they get $50 million for that plus the $18 million for the block, that shows you at that extremity in terms of scarcity, need, want. There is a marketplace even at that elite level. Well, we're doing the same thing down in our real world, guys. This is in our space, and we're using the same principles. So we love properties around that 700 to 1.2 million range because that's where we're finding scarcity.
Yeah, good question, Steve. Happy Gilmore. All the best with the golf. One for you, Ben.
I got one here from James. Hi, guys. I'm a weekly listener to the podcast, and I've also bought the book. Thank you very much. And if you're new to the podcast, it's called The Armchair Guide to Property Investing. You can jump on the website and you can order it and have it in a matter of days.
That's it. One of the listeners wrote in and said, "I love how your podcast has got no sales agenda in brackets except for the book."
Except for the book. Well,
so perhaps that's just the
because we're going to retire on the royalties.
Yep.
Actually, we should let everyone know that the book has become a bestseller.
It has become a bestseller,
and we are reprinting the book.
We are reprinting.
Yeah. So,
but just so everyone knows, there is no money in writing a book.
Yes.
None.
Trust me, there's not for the time. But it's all about education, and the book basically, ratifies what we talk about here on the podcast, which is great. Both are informative and intriguing, so keep up the good work. I have a question that I was hoping you may be able to provide for advice. I'm 26 years old, and I'm looking to invest in my second property with my partner, who's 23. We live in a rural area. Shout out to those in Albury Wodonga. My folks are up in Yarrawonga. It's a great part of the world. Very, very beautiful part of the world. And have around $110,000 in equity in our current owner-occupied dwelling, and good incomes with maximum borrowing capacity of around $700,000 to $800,000. Do you suggest try to break into the metropolitan market, i.e. Melbourne, with a property in an investment-grade suburb, which will turn our maximum borrowing capacity, basically utilise the whole maximum borrowing, or alternatively buy one or two properties in a major rural city? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this and how people on rural incomes should approach property investment in general sense.
Yeah, look, without knowing their circumstances,
James, I should say.
So
thanks, James.
Segue from the previous answer.
It is.
So all things being equal, we'd want to chase growth without knowing their circumstance any better.
Yep.
So I would chase a scarce asset in the Melbourne city, more than in the regionals. And just think about it. You've got ANZ down here, you've got the National Australia Bank down here, you've got big multinationals in Melbourne.
Telstra, BHP. Yep.
So there's lots of six-figure incomes that are on offer in the big capital cities versus these regional locations, which could have really great lifestyle, but could also be very vulnerable. So for me, it's a no-brainer. All things being equal, that if they've got that spare equity and they've got some surplus cash flow at the end of the month, I would say get yourself into the capital city job market and then buy something that, as you said before, between that 700 and 1.2, that's right in their sweet spot. Chasing the growth as long as they could afford a shortfall, and then maybe depending on what their goal is and what their next move looks like, moving to a balanced asset next, and then rounding off the portfolio with a couple of cash cows towards the end.
And that's all things being equal, and you're assuming that income is going to be consistent.
Correct.
So we take one step back and we say 26-year-old and a 23-year-old, how long before you get serious about, or you may not want to have kids. If you're not going to have kids, you're well on your way to financial prosperity. But if you are going to have kids,
that's a shout out for the family planning clinic right there.
I've always said in some of the work our team does here, we're marriage counsellors, we're birth control, we're all these types of things. Look, the fact is they cost a lot of money and they also disturb income. So from that point of view, we've got to think about that. So let's say we did look at that 700,000 to 800,000. Now the giveaway for me on that borrowing assessment of 700,000 to 800,000, they do have strong surpluses. So obviously, as a qualified mortgage broker, I look at that straight away and I know that's a strong surplus coming through. So coming back to your question, is it a different approach for rural people versus city people? No. It's your income.
Yep.
It's your income and
stability of income.
How that plays out. Because if we got you into the Melbourne market and got you into a position of a really highly negatively geared property for the short term, because remember, negative gearing is not a strategy, it's a moment in time, then you would understand that we need to make sure you can hold that asset medium to longer term. It's no good in buying that asset short term and then having to get out of it, because we need it to breathe like a good fine wine. So that would be my first point. And then I'm right on Bryce's coattails in terms of exactly what we would do. I would always have one quality asset that's scarce, investment grade suburb. The area does 80% of lifting, the property does 20% unless you're buying medium and high density, and then it's all bets off. That's the view that I take.
So unpack that a little bit more for the listeners, Ben. You just say there should be one shining light in their portfolio, which is the real the real heavy lifter in terms of its growth.
2 or 3 if you've got that strong income coming through. But I would say, okay, if we're going to go and load up on an $800,000 property in a metropolitan city, then I want to make sure that we can afford it medium to longer term. I don't want to be buying that asset, paying that premium on stamp duty, paying that premium on land tax if I'm not going to hold that asset for the medium to longer term. So if they were to come back and say, funny you should say that. We want to have 4 kids, and because it's a great environment to raise kids.
Income.
Oh, great golf courses, excellent fishing, great Murray Cod up that way, Lake Hume, all the best, ski fields around the corner. It's a great part of the world. The question then is, all right, well, that changes everything. I would then be probably looking at lower value properties and potentially in some rural areas because I need the yield, and I'm doing something, and I'm trying to align that to the long-term target.
So what are you telling me? There's no one size fits all?
Oh, gee, I think that's what I'm telling you.
Mate,
very good. Well done.
See why you're the Property Investment Advisor of the Year 2 times running, mate. Very, very good. Okay, let me see. We've got one from Kane here. Hi guys, love the podcast. I listen to it on loop at work some days when I can't handle any more radio. The book is great too. Keep up the good work. Thanks for the great feedback. Just have one question in regards to forecasting capital growth. I know you are conservative with your vacancy and interest rate assumptions, i.e. 7.5% and 10% respectively. Is that right? When interest rate assumptions are 7.5 and the vacancy 10. Yep, no, he's right.
Yep.
In your model. Are you also conservative in your capital growth assumptions? E.g., if historical growth was X, would you round down 1% or 2 or keep it the same? If you've covered this and I've missed it, sorry for the double lot. If not, I look forward to your answer. That's from Kane.
How good are these questions?
Mate, they're great. I love them.
So good, these questions. I don't even know whether we've covered it, so let's do it again.
Yeah.
So in our property wealth simulator, which is how we measure cash flows medium to long term and how we build client portfolios, reverse engineering, there's a few things we do use. So let's get your pens and paper out. These are the things I want you to remember. The first thing that we do use is at the moment, interest rate 7.25%. Okay, so long-term interest rates. Any existing mortgages that you currently hold, we put a 2% loading on those interest rates. Okay, now the 7.25 is up for debate. So every 5 years, we're going to look at that because we think that interest rates may not get to 7.25 for the next decade. Yeah. So we may be doing a disservice for our clients in saying that they need to provision for that when interest rates might be, very low or at 5 or 6%. So we may adjust that down to say a 6.75 as an example. Mm-hmm. We used to do 90% occupancy rates, which meant that 5 weeks of every year the property was vacant. Now we're doing 92%. So we're saying 4 weeks of every year that the property's vacant. Okay, so we've just done some assessments on the types of properties we're buying for our clients, and we shouldn't be buying them in areas that are oversupplied for the long term. So if you can hold a property for 5 years, you would like to think that the property hasn't been vacant for 20 weeks of those 5 years. Yep. So that's an assessment we make. The other thing that we do management fees ranging from 7.7 to 8.8, and we do 1.5% of the property value for ongoing holding costs, and we index that at 3%. Okay, we also index the property management fees at 3% as well.
And no depreciation.
So finally, let's get to the capital growth because this tells the big story. Okay, the big story with capital growth is we've done 40 years of assessment in the Melbourne market and we've done 25 years of assessment in every other market. So wherever we could get our hands on data, we've gone back as far as we can with reliable statistics on suburbs. And in Melbourne, over that 40-year period, there is the very, very blue chip areas, the very, very elite, scarce, high unoccupied areas on the fringe of the city, i.e. the Middle Parks, the Albert Parks, the St Kildas for houses, the Clifton Hills, the Carltons, the North Fitzroys, the Brunswicks, etc., it goes on, Richmond, blah, blah, blah. They have delivered in excess of 10% and some 11% compounding return each year based on the median value of that property. Mm-hmm. So we use a maximum of 8%. So we have said in our models, we are reducing those absolute scarce diamonds, $1 million strip locations, rare earth, those types of locations down to 8% capital growth. That's the highest we will let our advisors put into any of the models. And you'll see spruikers and everyone who are putting 10% usually.
I was going to say every book you pick up's got a 10% as the default.
So there's hopefully a really good answer. Now, that's the top end when we're chasing those scarce assets where there's a lot of shortfall. So when you put all of that together, there's going to be a big shortfall, which we have to subsidise with our cash flows. When we get down to our cash cows, we can go as low as 4 to 5% capital growth, and we have a ceiling on 7% long-term yields in our models.
So,
there it is, all out there, everyone to see.
And we've also said it before that, the financial planner say, past performance is no guarantee of future.
Yep.
We feel confident that past performance is a reasonable predictor of future performance for property because not much changes in that. No management to sack, there's no leverage, there's no risk over and above the things that are always there. Owner-occupiers buy with their heart. Yep. They make very practical decisions. And what I'm always saying to clients too is, as investors, you can pore over the data, pore over the stats, but the owner-occupier, who's the main part of the market you should be focused on, or buying in markets that have a focus of, they don't do that. Where's the school?
Yeah.
Can I walk to the park? Yeah. And do I feel good here?
And I will pay a premium to get into that area because I'm emotionally attached to all of those lifestyle drivers because it's in my subconscious. That's that whole human test. And the reality of what we try and do. So it rings true in terms of what we try and study.
Because the reverse of that was funny when I auditioned for the show way back when. I remember walking in, there was 110 of us who auditioned for the show. Yeah. And all of the other people who were auditioning were real estate agents who were saying, look at the floorboards, look at the granite bench tops, look at these beautiful sort of architraves, whatever it was that they focused on. And here I am spending 15 years focusing on yield, growth, demographics. So I'm walking into this house going, well, so I looked at the actors and I said, so what do you guys like to do for fun? And they go, we love to cook. So I just started talking about the floor plan in terms of and telling the story, which is ultimately what my show does, is it tells a story. Yeah. But that's what people who buy owner-occupier residents do. They don't talk about growth, they don't talk about yield, they don't talk about demographics in the suburb. Well, they do to a certain extent because they want to be in villages of people that are like, but they don't pore over the stats like we do for investors.
And great selling agents do that. I mean, there's certain selling agents that I know, they get sort of everyone in a group and they do a spiel. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm presenting this, but I'm really excited. Just imagine walking down to the coffee shops, having your bacon and eggs in the morning. The kids can go around. They're just selling the dream. Yeah. That's the great agent. The other ones just come through. Yeah, it's brick veneer. It's got energy efficiency. The solar panels.
Can you imagine the auctioneer getting up to the auction going, ladies and gentlemen, just wanted to know that it's got a 6.2% historical growth rate. The demographics in the area are largely more males than females, so they just don't do it.
Very true. You might be onto something there. Yeah. But I think over time there will be, I do believe that people, now that we can get better sales history, there will be a bit of that, and its performance has been X. Because I think even owner-occupiers will start to think about that. But yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for that. We really appreciate it.
Beautiful.
Kane, good job. I got one here from Brian. Hi guys, love the podcast immensely. If possible, could you discuss views on being able to be an active investor to essentially create an income while still passively investing through leverage? Is this a possible scenario, or what would someone need to look into to be able to do something similar? I'm a tradesman, so majority of the work I could do myself. Thanks very much.
Shout out to the Lifestyle Channel here. There's a show called The River Cottage. My wife absolutely loves it. So by default, I must love it because I have to watch it because she's watching it. And they do this very simple analogy. They go to the market and they say, I've got this tray of apples, right? And I sell the apples individually and I make a profit at the end. But it's always they're going, well, how can I add value to the apple? So they takes it home, turns it into an apple pie, takes it back to the market, and for the same product, he actually makes more money because he's added value to the apples.
Love the analogy.
So all we're doing here is with real estate is if you're in the position where you can add value to the real estate, you can turn the apples into the apple pie, clearly you can get a better result.
Yep.
But what we're always saying is that most people have a life. They've got a job, they've got kids, they've got sports on the weekend. So the idea that you can just renovate and add value available to everyone, I just don't think that's true. Some people it is, some people it isn't.
Yep.
So Brian's a classic where he could still adopt a very conservative strategy where he reverse engineers a passive income, but he could buy assets that he could use his skill set on the weekend to turn the apples into an apple pie and benefit his portfolio. So the answer, in my view, Brian, is yes, you can still do it conservatively, chasing a passive income, but using your skill set to actually add some value will be a huge thing. For most people who don't have the same skill set, the conservative path where you don't have to, you can still make money selling the apples and still make a very good retirement lifestyle.
So again, those new to the podcast, I'll just quickly define what we talk about as active investor versus passive investing. So investing in a principle is about you putting your money into something and letting that thing do its thing. Whether it be capital growth or whether it be, providing you with an income. That is traditional passive investing. Active investing is actually taking on a job. So similar to what you were saying before about making it into an apple pie, I've got to go home, make the pastry, do all that work. So I'm allocating time and I'm looking for a return on that time. Passive investment should be about, here's my money, go and do, and then let me get that money back. I'm a shareholder, that's what I expect. Now, I always want to see passive investors have some knowledge of what they're investing in. The worst thing you can do is just take some advice from someone at a barbecue or whatever, and then just think, yeah, I want to do that. And I want to spend $50,000 on BHP because someone said it's a good thing. So you still want to be accountable to yourself and accountable to your family in terms of those returns you get. So for me, active investing is basically about taking on another job and solving a bigger problem. If you can solve that bigger problem, you're going to potentially get better returns. Now, if you've got skills associated with solving the problem, i.e. you're a builder, it's a no-brainer. Buy that ugly duckling, buy that renovator's delight or renovator's mission and get into it and then add value. But don't move away from the fundamentals of buying in the right location and doing that as opposed to just saying, well, I can still add value to something that's out wide because it's going to take longer for you to get that return back.
Very good. The gold there is don't let go of the fundamentals. So I think as we round these Q&As off, Ben, I think we go back to Happy Gilmore at the end. Unfortunately, all you need is a little doubt in your own abilities and you default to the more confident person who you may well know more than. So that's the key. From the podcast, if people can continue to get their own confidence in their own ability and their own selections and then get the ability to pull a team of people around that share the same philosophies, they can get really good outcomes. And for that person who can... Brian,
yep,
he can add some value for his own efforts, which is just wonderful.
But I'm going to, confidence does not equate to competence. I mean, that is just a beautiful saying. So thank you for that, Steve. And I think everyone who's listening to that should be, you can be super confident as a great singer, but everyone else is telling you you're pretty ordinary. So someone's going to have to, let you know you're not good. That's important. So that is gold. So thank you very much. They were wonderful questions.
Great questions. As Ben said, a couple of them have been sitting on our desk now for 60 days or so. But we will get to them. So keep them coming.
Keep them coming, especially when they're like that. We'll get a story.
We'll definitely do one Q&A per month, but hopefully 2 Q&As per month, which would be great. Hey, the negative gearing debate hots up, Ben. The election's not that far away.
Yeah.
Excuse me. CoreLogic have put out a report which you want to highlight a few things.
Well, look, there's a couple of things in the report, timely report, and also SQM Research have put out their findings as well. So what CoreLogic have done, they're apolitical, so it's not a political statement. They just want to get the facts out into the marketplace, and what they've done is they've profiled the Australian residential property investor. So CoreLogic are one of the leaders, if not the leading a data resource for residential property information, and they put out some findings in terms of that information. So they go into lots of different areas around the profiling, the taxation of housing, housing supply, investor mortgage lending. So it's a really, really good report, and so we're going to provide a link to that on our Facebook. Yep. So that's all cool. But there's a couple of things. I mean, in episode 51, if you want to hear us rant about negative gearing and why it's so important to remain in its current form, have a listen to that episode. It's really important. But we're starting to see the positions and the views that we had being validated. So the first thing, we talk about in the 2013-14 financial year, investors claimed $3.719 billion in net rental losses, offsetting their taxable income, thereby reducing the amount of income tax paid to the federal government. But however, because CoreLogic effectively value every property in Australia each week, what's interesting is that in the 2015 year, there's been $51.2 billion in profits made from dwelling resales over that period. So if you think about that, that's the capital gain that the government's going to get 50% of. Okay, so it's really important to understand. In addition to that, there's $45 billion in property-related tax revenues collected by the state and local government. So as the values of properties rise, land tax goes up, and so too does stamp duty revenues. I mean, you only need to look at the state government of New South Wales in terms of how flush they are with cash at the moment, and the majority of that has been because their property boom, and they've been getting all of these huge stamp duty revenues. So, two things here. We don't want to rub Peter to pay Paul. I mean, and the Labor government policy is absolutely going to affect property prices. Property prices will fall and rents will go up. So that's the most important takeout to this. And SQM, Louis Christopher, has basically come out, and he, interestingly, is all for negative gearing in terms of changes. Thinks it has to happen, and he's gone off and his team have done their research and modelling 15% drop in property prices over a 3-year period. Well, that's not great. Takes confidence away, takes sentiments away, stops the construction boom that we're enjoying, which is really critical for our GDP and jobs. 1 in 4 people in the Australian employed in Australia are in the property sector. It's just not good policy.
Very good. I agree with that. So using those stats, they're giving 3.7 billion in concessions, and potentially getting 60 odd billion in revenue because of it. So it doesn't take a rocket science to work out that the maths is in their favour if they keep it going.
Correct, and it's only a moment in time. So that's the losses that they've claimed for that year. But if rates go down further, then those losses are going to be less because we're not dropping rents. Rents aren't falling through the floor. So the cost of running that property is getting less and less because interest rates are going down, which means a lot more people are going to be positively geared in terms of how to look after their property. And all the people that we're putting into property, this is about a passive income for life. Okay, this is about creating financial independence. So those people will be paying tax into the future. So they're deferring, they're claiming losses early, but they're going to be paying for them. Don't worry, they're going to be paying revenues on income that they enjoy outside of any pensions. So they're going to be less of a burden on the government. Hence it's really important that people understand that we want property to be part of people's ability to create wealth so they can look after their families.
It's a great vehicle for Middle Australia to look after their self-funded retirement. Hey, as we say every week when we do the Q&As, disclaimer, it's all general information. So no one act on the information we talked about today. Go and talk to your trusted investment-savvy advisor.
And qualified if they are.
For your own circumstances. But we hope that these stir up some ideas and some takeaways for each and every one of our listeners that they can apply to themselves, and then they can go away and get some competent and qualified advice.
So I'll put my Pippa hat on and say one of the great places to start is to talk to a qualified property investment advisor. And you can go to the Pippa website, www.pippa.asn.au, and you can search for qualified property investment advisors in your area. If there aren't any in your area, there's definitely, they're all over Australia, and we've got more and more people doing the formal qualification so they can give better advice, understand people's risk profiles, and hopefully not try and sell you something, but give you great advice.
Here, well said. So, folks, every week we encourage you to join the conversation. So, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're doing a Facebook Live, Ben. Next, you coming on the couch?
I will be there.
Next Wednesday, the 29th of June at 8:30 p.m.
Woo!
Eastern Standard Time. So, all my Perth friends over in Perth, it's 6:30 p.m. For all of the Adelaide folk, it's 8 p.m. But for 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we've done it deliberately at that time so the whole country can participate after business hours.
Come join us.
So send us a question via Facebook. There's also an opportunity on the night to ask questions, so come loaded on the night, and Ben and I, we're going to try and get through as many questions as we possibly can to help people on the ground who are looking to invest in property. So we'd love you to join us if you can. And haven't asked for a favour for a little while, but I'm very keen. If you love our podcast, we're getting lots of great feedback. We always ask the question, can you just tell one person? If you've got time, tell two. But if you don't have time, just tell one other person and let them know that you're enjoying the podcast, because it means that we can get more out there. And if you're listening on the train or the tram right now, if you wouldn't mind going to the iTunes icon and just leaving a 5-star review. That helps us go into
Just a review. We shouldn't assume that it's going to be a 5-star one.
1-star reviews, don't bother.
Yeah, if you're not happy with what we do, disregard this next bit.
No, someone's given us a 1-star review. We're very balanced here. Well, 2 stars, I was the same.
One of our competitors.
Yes, but we've been very lucky. So, folks, the reason we're being a little bit self-serving there is it just allows us to get this podcast into more algorithms, which means more people can come across it and more people can make better decisions, which is the mission of the couch.
Yeah, and I think from our point of view, we do read them, and it does motivate us to continue to bring our confidence, our content up through there. So that's the message from my end. It's like, it's really good to know that people are valuing our stuff, so we'll put more effort into it. And the more people that learn this stuff is, hopefully going to change and transform their financial position. So I like that.
Very true. And if only they could rate the sign-offs, mate, individually. You'd have 5-star sign-offs.
No, we wouldn't.
We'd have more 5-star sign-offs, wouldn't we?
No, we wouldn't. No. Practicality test video. We're doing that next week. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting a nod from Imus. So are we going to be able to release that straight at the end of next week?
Yeah, but if people are on Facebook, they'll get to notice first.
Oh, good work.
So if they go to Facebook, they'll be the first. You hear about everything first on our. If you join our conversation, Imus, you hear about everything first, don't you?
Beautiful. All right, over to me.
Over to you, mate.
Over to the favourite part of the show.
Yeah, I agree.
Russian. Russian. I don't know whether we've done it before, but I haven't got a tick next to it. So let's just see how we go.
Makes me nervous if there's any sort of.
Oh no. What did we say? Lasagna. Dos lasagna. No, I have no idea.
Oh, no, that's actually good.
Do zivadanya. Do zivadanya.
Do you think that if you just keep saying it over and over, it'll
Of course, it's that sort of frenetic sort of...
Repetition is the mother of learning. There you go, folks.
Zvidanya.
We need to know from the Russian, the expat person living in Russia, or even the Russian right now who's heard that.
Absolutely miles off.
Let us know if Ben's nailed it. But, until next week, for the rest of us who aren't born in Russia and we don't know what Ben just said, see you later. See you next week.